Hello YouTube and welcome to another tutorial. So in this video I'm going to show you how to install a very promising Linux OS called NixOS. So are you ready? Let's get started. So as I told you in this video, we're gonna install Linux OS called NixOS. As you can see here, it's a very promising actually Linux distribution which has a different approach to other distributions because actually it has a declarative approach. So we're gonna learn about it, but first thing we're gonna just install it using what we call a minimal install. Okay, so if you go to the download section here, you can see that you can download ISO image using graphical, but you can also use a minimal ISO image in order to install it, and that's what we gonna do because we don't need any graphical user interface. We're gonna just start from the bare minimal. Okay, and for that I'll be using my Proxmox server in order to install it. Okay, so I already downloaded the ISO image, so I have an Intel platform, so I will download that. Okay, so let's go to our Proxmox and we simply gonna create a virtual machine. Okay, so let's create a new VM. Actually, before creating a VM we have to upload the ISO image to our storage. So here I will just go to my storage here, and I go to ISO images, and I'm gonna upload the ISO that I have just downloaded from the website. So this is our NixOS minimal. So as you can see, the file size is around 1.15 gigabytes. So I will upload it to my Proxmox. Then we can begin the process of creating a new VM. Okay, here we go, the task has been done. So now we can just go and create a VM. Okay, so the VM ID will be, in my case, 167, and here is the name of the VM, so you can choose whatever name you want, but in order to be consistent I'm gonna call it NixOS. Okay, so I will go next, and here on the second screen I will choose the ISO image from the list. So here, as you can see, I have NixOS minimal, so I'm gonna choose it, and here I will leave the default here for the guest OS. I will go next. For the system I will keep also the defaults. I will go next. For the disk you can leave it 32, it's pretty fine, or you can just use 20 if you want. Okay, so let's just keep 20 and go next. For the CPU I will choose 2 cores, and for the type I will go to the host in order to get all the features of the processor that I have. Okay, for the memory you can leave it also for 2 gigabytes, but for me I will go to 4 gigabytes. Okay, and for the network I will leave the default. Normally the default is VMPR0 here, in order to get actual IP address automatically from my DHCP here. So now I have everything in order to launch my virtual machine. So I will hit finish, and hopefully, as you can see here on the left, the VM number 167 is created. Okay, so I'll click on it and I will launch here a console in order to see the process of the install. Okay, so I will click on the console. I will choose no VNC. So this is the window that will be showing the whole process of the install. So let's start our VM virtual machine. I will try to maximize that. Here we go. So this is the first screen. So of course I will choose the first option, which is the installer. So as you can see here, I'm installing version 24.11. So let's hit enter and see the full process. So it's like a live CD button. Okay, so here we go. Welcome to the NixOS 24.11. Okay, so here you can see the NixOS and the root account have empty password. Okay, so me, I'll be connecting to this machine via actually my terminal. So in order to get connected via SSH, we have to actually put a password for the NixOS. Okay, so I will just create a password here for NixOS account. So you can choose whatever password you want. Okay, so now the password has been added to the NixOS account. Next thing, in order to connect to this machine, we need an IP address. So let's execute APA in order to see what IP address I get. So as you can see here, I get IP address .1.13. So I'll be using this IP address in order to connect via SSH to this virtual machine in order to just see the whole process. Okay, so I will get rid of this window and I will open my PowerShell and let's connect to our machine. So remember, the account is NixOS and the machine has an IP address of 192.168.1.13. Here we go. So this is, are you sure to continue connecting? So I will answer yes. And here I will enter the password that I have set up. Hopefully, here we go. So I am in. So now we are inside our NixOS virtual machine. So the first thing that we need is to create partitions. Okay, so first of all, let me show you the disk that I have using fdisk-l. Yes, I have to execute that with the root privileges. Here we go. So you can see here I have a disk called /dev/sda, which is 20 gigabytes, as you have seen during the install. Okay, and the first one is just the ISO image. So I'll be using actually this disk here of 20 gigabytes in order to create two partitions that is needed in order to install NixOS. So we're gonna create a boot partition and system partition. Okay, so for that you have different options. You can use parted in order to partition your disk, but you can also use cfdisk, which is very famous and very easy to use. So if you remember, the name of my disk is /dev/sda. So I'll execute that. Always forget root privileges. Here we go. So we have to select label type. So of course here we're gonna stick with GPT. Here we go. So you can see that I have here a disk of 20 gigabytes. So we're gonna create a new partition. So remember, the first partition must be a boot partition, and I will create it. So I will just choose here new one. So for the size I will choose that 1 gigabytes. That's enough. Okay, so I will hit enter. And a very important thing, for the type here you have to choose the first one, EFI system. Here we go. So as you can see, the first partition has been created, which is the boot partition actually, and we have 19 gigabytes left. So for this partition I will create it using actually a Linux file system. Okay, so it's chosen by default as a Linux file system. So now all I have to do is to write that. So I'll choose right here at the bottom. Are you sure you want to write the partition table to the disk? So of course I will answer yes. And finally, let's quit that. Okay, so now we are done. So let's verify once again using fdisk -l. So now, as you can see here, we have created our two partitions. SDA1, which is our boot, and SDA2, which is our file system. Okay, so next we have to format our partitions. So let's format the boot partition. So I will use here actually this command here, make file system. So the file system for the boot is FAT32, and we name it with this option here -n as the boot partition. So let's execute that. Here we go. So the boot partition, the file system, which is FAT32, has been formatted this device, which is SDA. So let's do the same, not exactly the same, because we'll be formatting SDA2 using the extended 4 file system. Okay, so let's do that very quickly. Here we go. So now we are formatting this SDA2 as extended 4. And here for label, you can add label if you want with -L as NixOS if you want. Here we go. So now all our formatting has been finished. Okay, next thing is to mount our partitions. So we're gonna actually mount the second partition as our root partition in the /mnt. Okay, this is mandatory. Here we go. And for the boot partition, we have to mount it in a special directory under the mnt, which is actually boot directory. So we have to create a folder in this /mnt. So I'm gonna create a folder on the mnt. Then we have to mount the boot partition in this boot directory. Okay, so let's do that very easily. So here I have added some special permissions with this option here -o umask 077. Okay, so this is also needed for the boot partition in order to avoid any problem in the futures. Okay, here we go. So now one very important thing is we have to generate what we call some configuration files, and those configuration files are the heart of the NixOS. Okay, so we have to generate them using this command here, nixos generate config root under the mnt. So as you can see here, it has generated two files, hardware configuration with content configuration of our hardware, and this configuration.nx, which actually has the specification for NixOS. Okay, so those files are the heart of the NixOS operating system. So let's, for example, open this configuration.nx file and edit it. So just to see what it contains, but it's better to open it using sudo command because we're gonna make some modification on it. So it's file written using the next language. So here you can see the bootloader, which is in this case group. So you can change it or leave it as is. So you can change here your, for example, your time zone if you want. All you have to do is to uncomment it. So for example, here I will choose Euro Amsterdam as my time zone. You can also here choose the fonts for your console if you want. So as I told you, this is the heart of your NixOS. Here we don't need an X server because we'll be just using the console here. What else can I change in this file? So here the sounds, I don't need sounds, so we're gonna actually change it in the future videos, but for this video I'll just show you how to use it. So let's define, for example, here a user account. So I will just uncomment those files, or actually lines. So I'll create a user here called, for example, Amina. I will make it under the group will, and for the packages here you can add the packages that you want to install for this user. So for example, I can add Vim. So this is actually, as I told you, the heart of NixOS. So instead of entering commands, so for example, if you're using Debian in order to install Vim, you just type at the console apt-get install Vim. But here it has a declarative approach. You just write what program you want to install in this configuration file, and they will be installed automatically. Okay, so for example, I just need just two programs, Vim and htop. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want also OpenSSH service to be run. So here you can see that I have to uncomment this line here, enabled OpenSSH daemon. So I will just uncomment this line and OpenSSH will be available, so I can connect to this virtual machine. So there is also some firewalling option that we can change later if you want. So this is just a brief view of this configuration file. So it has many options. You can add other options if you want, but here I will just stick with the default here. Okay, so now that you have make the change that you want, we're gonna install it actually. So let's quit this, and in order to install it, NixOS install. So let's run this command and see what we get. So of course it has to connect to the internet and download all the packages needed for the installation. So till this moment everything is done. You have successfully. So for us, we're still waiting for the end, and hopefully the system will be installed. Okay, once again, and hopefully this time I will not get any error. Okay, so now as you can see, it's gonna install our system. So here, as you can see, it has given me the option to set a password for the root account, so I will enter it. Here we go. So the installation is finished. Okay, so now we are done. The installation is complete. One last thing is, as you have seen, we have created an account called Amina, so we have also to set up a password for this account. Okay, so I will use simple commands in order to set the password for the account Amina. Okay, here we go. So let's set up a password. Actually, I mistyped my password, so let's repeat it again. Here we go. So now everything is done. One last thing is to reboot our system. Okay, so here one last thing before booting, you have to go back to your Proxmox and you go to your VM here, NixOS. So you go to your hardware and you have to make sure that your BIOS is actually UEFI as we have set up. So let's launch our virtual machine. So now you can see that your virtual machine is starting. So let's log on using the account that we have created and with the password that we have set up. And as you can see, I am in. This is it. That was just a brief video to show you how to set up actually NixOS on Proxmox. And on the coming videos I will show you and will go in more detail how to set up and view all the different advantages of this operating system. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content. And if you have any suggestion for future video, drop them in the comments below. As always, I hope it has been informative for you and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Bye bye.